Right. Hi, everyone. So we are introducing the food sovereignty webinar. Just a note that we are currently recording this introduction a couple days past the webinar due to a glitch in the recording. So the first couple minutes are going to be a separate recording that we just used to introduce what the webinar is about. And then once the speakers start speaking, that is the official recording of the webinar that happened on October 9th. So we just wanted to be transparent about that and let you know as we go ahead. So welcome for all those who are watching the recording. And for those who were part of the webinar, welcome again. It's nice to have you here watching again. This food sovereignty webinar was hosted by Odona Terra, and we have some lovely, we had some lovely speakers, Laura Wilmot from the FNQLSDI, as well as Tina Nickel from the Keepers of the Circle that presented their case studies regarding food sovereignty. So we're going to look at that a little bit more in a minute. So before we begin, we just want to do a quick land acknowledgement. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. And while we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we all call home. And because I'm about to introduce myself as well, I'll just say that I'm currently joining in from the traditional and unceded territory of the Omami Winniwak, so the Algonquin, and the Anishinaabe and the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk people. So again, thank you for everyone joining from different parts of different lands. So here again is a bit of a more official slide of our speakers. So Tina Nickel and Laura Wilmot. So Tina Nickel will be presenting about the Kinuma-Gagumik Green Space Initiative through Keepers of the Circle, as well as other green space initiatives and food forests that have been created through engagement with Indigenous communities in Ontario with a specific focus on northern climates. So we look forward to that presentation. We also have Laura Wilmot from the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Sustainable Development Institute, which she's the legal analyst at, and Laura will also be presenting part of her PhD research, which talks about the difference between food sovereignty and food security. So just a bit about us. My name is Fiona. I'm the Environment and Consultation Planner at Odona Terra. I am here together with Mathilde Butler as hosts on behalf of Odona Terra. And just a little bit about Odona Terra. We're a small consulting company that works primarily for Indigenous communities to support communities to lead their own environmental resilience projects. And we also focus a lot on the socioeconomic component, so not just environment, and ensuring that things are looked at from a holistic perspective and ensuring that communities have a voice in resilience projects, especially when it comes to impacts on the lands. And throughout the work that we've been doing, food security continues to come up a lot. And so we have evolved to include this part within our work as separate food security planning, as well as within general resilience projects that food security is highlighted in these processes. So this is all thanks to the voices of the communities and communicating the need for this and us evolving together as a result. So just a little bit about me. I've been working for Odona Terra for almost 5 years. And some of the focuses that I have at the company are Indigenous knowledge and land use studies, climate change resilience work, and also food security. I'm currently about to finish my postgraduate certificate of food security at the Toronto Metropolitan University. So I'm very excited about that. And I also have a permaculture design certificate. So I also love being on the land and working with the plants and the land and learning and understanding better how we are all connected. So that's a bit about me. I'll leave it to Mathilde as well to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, welcome. So I just want to acknowledge first that I'm currently in Saguenay, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Innu First Nation, and usually I live in Montreal, which is the as well traditional and unceded territories of the Mohawk Nation, also known as Tiohtià:ke. I am the impact assessment planner at Odona Terra, and I've only been here since the spring, so still quite new to the team. This is my first project that touches upon the topic of food sovereignty very directly, so I'm very excited to be working on this with Fiona and to be here with you guys.
Thank you, Mathilde. So just quickly, a bit of an overview of what this webinar is going to be talking about. So we have 3 sections. The first one is case study number 1, which is food security versus food sovereignty, which will be presented by Laura Wilmot. And next we will have a case study number 2, which is Indigenous food forests in northern climates by Tina Nickel. And lastly, we have a section about what is next. And so providing resources on how to create your own projects or build on existing projects, opportunities that exist, and any other resources. So we look forward to going through that. And Mathilde will be introducing our first guest speaker.
Yeah, so hi again. A little bit more information about Laura Wilmot. As Fiona mentioned, she's the legal analyst for the consultation teams at the FNQSDI. Laura lives on the traditional and unceded territory of the Huron-Wendat First Nation, which is also known as the Nyan-Wencio near Quebec City. Laura also sits on the First Nations and Inuit food security table, which also kind of fueled the presentation that you're about to watch. Her PhD research touches upon the reaffirmation of Inuit self-determination through the construction of sustainable food system in Nunavik. So her research provides a legal analysis of the implementation and how the UNDRIP can contribute to this topic. And on top of that, Laura is also a lecturer at the Université du Québec en Abitibi-Témiscamingue, which is known as UQAT.
Thank you, Mathilde. So without further ado, we will switch to the original webinar presentation where Laura Wilmot begins her presentation. So thank you, everyone.
As I had today, first I'll start by defining the concepts of food sovereignty and food security. So we're all starting from the same base when talking about that. As well, I will trace the origin and development of these concepts. So where did it start and where are we now? So that we can then maybe analyze the potential points of divergence between approaches that are centered on food security and those that are based on food sovereignty. And I will then share some initiatives that really demonstrate how these concepts apply in a concrete context. And finally, propose practical solutions and maybe ideas on how to reconcile food sovereignty and food security. So on a more practical level, it was already mentioned, but as part of my work at the FNQLSDI, I have been part of the food security of First Nations and Inuit table since 2021. And the table's objective is really to promote collective commitment to food security in communities through social economy, school nutrition, healthy lifestyle habits, the fight against climate change, and traditional food as well. There are people from every AFNQL commission on the table, so it's not an initiative from the FNQL-SDI directly. Getting to the heart of the matter, before we can talk about food security, I need to talk about food insecurity. According to a report by the First Nations Quebec Labrador Health Social Services Commission, there's nearly 1 adult in 4 living with children that is food insecure in First Nations communities in Quebec. So I saw that a lot of people are not in Quebec. I'm sorry, like my numbers are more applied to Quebec, but I think it gives a general idea. And the proportion of households experiencing severe food insecurity is higher in rural and non-road accessible regions. In addition to remoteness, food insecurity can also be attributed to a shortage of locally produced foodstuffs, a low purchasing power, distribution problems, a lack of culinary skills and knowledge about food. In the case of First Nations and Inuit, the decline in consumption of traditional foods that is merely caused by climate change, among other factors, also contributes to food insecurity. Quebec's First Nations and Inuit really bear the double burden of food insecurity and chronic disease. The diets of Quebec's First Nations and Inuit have undergone major changes in just a few decades. It has gone from a diet based on local natural resources to a mixed diet or one based exclusively on commercially available products. And in non-treaty First Nations communities, all remote communities have access to a grocery store, which in 75% of cases is in the community. Half of the communities also have access to a general store. In semi-isolated regions, all communities have access to a grocery store as well as a general store, and half of the grocery stores are in the communities. And in isolated regions, there's almost only one general store that is located in all communities and is available for the purchase of groceries. So the inhabitants of these communities therefore depend solely on the food supply available at these retailers. So that was for my context. I will now follow with the definition and start with food security. So the FAO, the Organization of Food and Agriculture from the United Nations, says that food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preference for an active and healthy life. How I will present it today is that food security is like a big puzzle with many interlocking pieces. Traditionally, that puzzle had 4 pieces. The first piece is availability. It's the part that represents the quantity of food that is available. So think of it like having well-stocked shelves in your grocery store. If the shelves are full, people can get to them. So of course, it depends on several conditions, like harvest, the logistics behind supplying a grocery store, and trade. We know, for example, that avocados aren't grown in Canada. The second piece is access. So it's really the ability of people to buy or obtain this food. It depends on your family income, the store prices, and the proximity of the store. For example, if the grocery store is well stocked, but a family can't afford to pay or it's too far away, then access becomes difficult. The third piece, utilization, is what we do with food. So it's not just about eating it, but also how we prepare it and how our bodies absorb it. To use food well, you need to have access to a variety of foods. You need to know how to cook them, and as well to have some knowledge in nutrition. And finally, the fourth piece is stability, which means consistency. In other words, we don't want availability, access, and use to be just one-offs, but to be present continuously over time. In 2020, the FAO experts added 2 new pieces to the puzzle. The first new piece is sustainability. So this is the idea that our food system must be able to feed people today without depleting resources for future generations. For example, we need to ensure that our farming practices respect the environment and that we use resources responsibly. And the second new piece is agency, or the power to act. It's a bit like giving communities the keys to decide for themselves what they eat, what they produce, and how they manage their food. This enables them not simply to be passive consumers, but also actors who influence their own food system. It's really this dimension that has added a cultural perspective to the definition of food security. So when we talk about food security today, we're no longer just talking about having enough food or having access to it. We're also talking about making conscious choices, ensuring long-term sustainability, and empowering communities. Now, food sovereignty. La Via Campesina defines it as the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced using sustainable methods, and the rights of people to define their own agricultural and food system. This approach, therefore, goes beyond the notion of food security, asserting the power of communities to make decisions about their own food system. It also reflects a critique of industrial food systems, which often favor the interest of big businesses over small-scale producers and local communities. As we see today with the situation of farmers in Quebec, there's a local production that is less and less a matter of course, and this is what the food sovereignty movement is trying to reverse. So food sovereignty is seen as a reaction to the globalized industrial food system, and is really opposed to privatized conceptions of food security. It promotes decentralized food governance in the face of the negative impacts of globalization, such as land expropriation, loss of access to adequate food, and the effects of global economic policies. There are some voices within this movement that call for stricter regulation, while others see food sovereignty as more as a normative tool to challenge neoliberal policies. So my question is to look at, are these two concepts complementary or are they conflicting? Food security is central in the academic debate, and it's often perceived as an overly simplistic approach, neglecting the cultural specificities of Indigenous peoples and their profound links with the environment. Food sovereignty, on the other hand, is better suited to addressing the food challenges faced by First Nations. Food sovereignty really prioritizes the rights of people to define their own food system and insist on local control and sustainable management of natural resources that are really crucial aspects for First Nations whose traditional food practices are closely linked to their ecosystem. The Inuit organization Nunavik, that is in Inukjuak in Nunavik, that I had the chance to visit last May, has chosen to replace the term food security with food sovereignty in all of their reports, all their literature on their website, and every document they make, really to underline the need for an approach that is more rooted in local realities. And this change in terminology reflects the importance of autonomous resource management and an approach that integrates cultural, environmental, and identity dimensions. By offering a more comprehensive response to food needs that are rooted in the culture and tradition of communities, food sovereignty then becomes a key concept for developing fairer, more inclusive policies and laws, and better able to meet the food challenges of First Nations. I will now move on to a brief historical context to better understand how these concepts developed. So I will start with the origins of food sovereignty. Food sovereignty really is a political concept that was first developed at the Food Summit in Rome in 1996, and mainly by the global peasant movement La Via Campesina, which brings together agricultural workers, peasant organizations, and Indigenous peoples. The concept of food sovereignty is articulated around 6 pillars. So you remember the food security definitions. There were 6 pieces to the puzzle. Here we could say also 6 pieces. And these pillars were defined in 2007 at the LL.M Forum. The first pillar is feeding people. Then there's valuing food providers, localizes food systems, encourages local control, build knowledge and skills, and then works with nature. These pillars really demonstrate the importance of local autonomy, preservation of traditional knowledge, and harmony with the environment. So coming from a legal background, if we look at food sovereignty on the international scene and as well in Canada, from an international perspective, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and of Other People Working in Rural Areas, so UNDROP, was adopted in 2018, and it really represents the closest legal instrument to formal recognition of food sovereignty in international law. This declaration explicitly supports the right of peasants to access the land and sovereignty over their food system, but it's important to note that Canada has not signed this declaration, which hinders the concrete application of its principles within the Canadian legal framework. Canada has defended its position by raising concerns about the redundancy of certain UNDROP protections, arguing that existing international instruments such as the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights already offers sufficient protection for rights related to food, land, and agriculture, and the complexity of managing land rights, as well as the potential conflict between the protection of farmers' rights and those of big agribusiness was also a factor in the Canadian position. At the federal level here in Canada, the action plan for the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, so UNDRIP, was published in 2023 following the federal government adoption of the UNDRIP Act in 2021. And it includes certain measures relevant to a question of complementarity or opposition, and specifically mentions sovereignty in the broader context of Indigenous people self-determination. Among the most significant measures, Measure 87 explicitly supports the food security, sovereignty, and sustainability of Indigenous peoples through dedicated funding and other support programs. This measure also encourages the promotion of food-focused research to better understand the intersection between food security, sovereignty, and sustainability. As for food security, we've seen the evolution of the concept in its definition, so the 6 pieces and the 2 that were added, but there really are hundreds of definitions in the literature. So the FAO is the definition being the most widely used. I personally think that the debate at both international and local level is really going to take a turn towards sustainable food systems and food sovereignty. I now wanted to share some initiatives of Canada's First Nations regarding food sovereignty and security. In November 2021, the First Nations and Inuit Food Security Table hosted a virtual forum that was called Feeding Our Communities, First Nations and Inuit Food Security Forum. During the forum, the participants expressed an interest in sharing information and knowledge on food autonomy, food security, and food sovereignty solutions. And as a result of this forum, there are tons of inspiring initiatives that we heard, all of which are in themselves ways for communities to regain control of their food sovereignty after having had food imposed on them by industrial food system. It was not easy for me to make geographical representations with my initiatives, so I tried to take different spaces. But if you're interested in hearing about more initiatives of this kind, we're doing a new forum also this winter in February. So the first initiative is the Inuit Tapiri Kanatami Food Security Strategy. They developed a national Inuit food security strategy to address the serious food security challenges that face Inuit communities. And this process is based on a few main axes. The first one being community involvement. So ITK really works with communities to understand their specific food security needs and then integrates local perspectives into decision making. The strategy also aims to ensure a stable supply of traditional foods like caribou and fish. while also improving access to affordable, quality industrial foods. They also focused on preserving and promoting traditional food practices, ensuring that hunting, fishing, and gathering can continue in a sustainable way. And they have a plan to put their strategy in action, and it really strives to promote sustainable infrastructures, nutrition education, and public policies to tackle the root causes of food insecurity, including the remoteness of communities, the high food cost, and the impacts of climate change. Finally, ITP acts as a spokesperson to pressure the Canadian government to implement policies that are tailored to the food security needs of Inuit communities, while also insisting on respect for Inuit land and cultural rights. So the National Food Security Strategy highlights the importance of food sovereignty for the Inuit and serves as a model for future policies, ensuring that proposed solutions are rooted in local knowledge and respectful of tradition. The second initiative is the Unaminshipu Community Food Reserve. The objective of this food reserve was to provide emergency food assistance to community members that are experiencing increased food insecurity, and to create a local food reserve in case of supply problems during the winter months. So this project really involved a lot of members of the community, and they got pasta, canned goods, baby food, and household products. And they now have 11,000 kilos of items that are stored at the Unaminshipu Arena, because this off-road community that is on the lower North Shore stocks food for the winter, and they also receive funding from Indigenous Services Canada. During the shipping season, so mostly summer, the Bella de Gagné, a big ship, transports goods to the lower North Shore, and merchants and residents alike can therefore obtain supplies from the region's major centers using this maritime delivery system. But the chief from Unaminshipu realized that the supply was really vulnerable when that ship broke down. So that's why they reacted with this food reserve. Then the Lustugush Food Sovereignty Initiative. For a bit of context, since time immemorial, the Mi'kmaq have fished, hunt, and gathered, and their spiritual belief was that the Creator would provide everything they needed. So in the 1900s, there was no vacant or unused land in Lustugush. They had potato fields, vegetable gardens, grain, livestock. And then in the 1950s, subsistence farming became in decline, but hobby farms and farmsteads remained. So now in 2021, they planned to add a greenhouse, to have more food storage, to have a processing area, and to build a food sovereignty plan for the community. So they started distributing food to the community food bank. They started a Meals on Wheels project, and a gardening in Lustugush Facebook group where there's sharing and exchanges. There's also a Yald group that distributes seeds in the community. And now their Lustugush food sovereignty plan is in place, and they have community food basket, they have medicine culture, they have educational programs and community events, and they also consider sources of income like coming from seeds, seedling, teas, gardening services. And finally, the last initiative is the Chisasibi Community Greenhouse Project. So it was in March 2018 that the Chisasibi Center for Sustainability Project was presented and received the support of the Chief and Council of the Cree Nation. The project is organized around the desire to reshape the way community members learn, work, and coexist to initiate change for the good of the community. It really aims to improve the quality of life in the community by developing programs and strategies to address community needs and issues, partnering with influential organizations and other stakeholders to co-lead this movement with. The Chisasibi Center for Sustainability is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote self-reliance and create a framework to guide research, education, and action to lay the foundation for the sustainable management of production system and the sustainable design of food, water, and as well green energy, while combining innovation with EU knowledge and expertise with respect for and for the benefit of the Cree Nation. So the Chisasibi Community Greenhouse project is a social economy initiative that represents a unique opportunity to generate local knowledge about greenhouse vegetables production and promote healthy eating in the community. It also aims to create full-time jobs and build expertise in northern food systems while enhancing food security and sovereignty for the Cree Nation of Chisasibi and Inuit. So, already my conclusion. In conclusion, food security and food sovereignty are not in opposition, I believe, but rather complementary in the quest for a sustainable future. While food security focuses primarily on food access and availability, food sovereignty goes further by integrating crucial dimensions such as self-determination, resource management, and respect for the cultural traditions of Indigenous peoples. Traditional Indigenous economies that are based on hunting, fishing, and gathering really show that access to traditional foods is intimately linked to natural resource management. Yet, despite co-management initiatives, First Nations and Inuit are still too often left out of the decisions that affect their territories. So by focusing on the autonomy of Indigenous peoples and the reappropriation of their food system, food sovereignty appears to be a sustainable response to current global challenges, whether in terms of social justice, climate resilience, or ecosystem preservation. Indigenous legal and other obstacles stand in the way of its application. Recognition of land rights and the UNDRIP is thus really an essential step. And moving forward, it will really be essential to strengthen concrete commitments, building on the resilience and knowledge of Indigenous communities to build more just, inclusive, and ecologically sustainable food systems. So food sovereignty represents not only a powerful tool for decolonization, but also a path towards a future where food security is assured for all while respecting the rights and traditions of Indigenous peoples. So thank you very much for listening. I think the questions will be at the end after Tina's presentation. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. Yes, I know I saw that we had at least one question. I'm wondering if it's a quick question, is it maybe worth it to answer it now, or do you feel like it's long enough that maybe we should wait? Laura, what do you think? The question is, who decides the shipping fee eligibility and how can we change the process?
So is that question related to the Unamen Chipu and the Bella de Gagné, maybe? Yeah, I think I'll think about it and have an answer ready for the question period. But thank you for your question.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so wonderful. Thank you so much again for that. That was very informative, and it's very important, I think, also for us to understand that food security does not always include all of those other concepts, and that's why food sovereignty is such an important component that is now only being recognized a lot of the time by different organizations. So it was really, really great to hear also, Laura, from your presentation that more organizations are applying food sovereignty now. Yeah, so thank you so much again. I have a little, icebreaker in between. So before we go into the next presentation, we have a little other activity. So it has to do with bioregional appropriateness. And that is a big term, but essentially what it means, and I think we heard a lot about that in Laura's presentation as well, just about how context is really important. And so bioregional appropriateness means that food, the way food looks in one place doesn't mean, even though in that place it might be able to achieve food security or be able to meet the needs of the community. But in another place, that might look very different. It might be completely different food. Just like how, depending on location and climate, there are different nutritional needs as well. So we have a little quiz for you, just to see how you feel nutritional content looks like in foods, because we often look at it from a specific context. We have certain ideas of what that can look like. So we're going to do a little poll. If I can figure it out. Hold on. Oh no. Okay. Okay, so poll. Oh, have people already answered this? It looks like this question has been, okay, hold on. I think this was already on, and I think I'm just gonna start it again if possible. Sorry about that.
Yeah, someone was saying that the question was already up when they entered the webinar.
Oh no. Okay, do you mind if we just restart it?
Go for it. Yeah, it's working now.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, so the question is, which of the following foods has the most amount of vitamin C? So we'll give you 15 seconds to answer this one. It looks like people are already answering number 2, which is great. So number 2, if you just scroll down, you'll see that one. And the question is, what has the highest level of vitamin A? Oh, someone can't see it. Oh, shoot. Okay.
Lisa, there's an icon at the bottom of the screen that says polls and quizzes. I don't know if you can click on that one, and for me it pops up on my other screen, but perhaps it should be there. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, I'll give just a few more seconds. So I know, Lisa, you just got in, so I'll just wait for you. Currently, it looks like, oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't say it yet. Okay. I'll wait. Lisa, were you able to answer? I don't see change. Okay, now I see a change. Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll end the poll in just a couple seconds. Okay, so I'm ending the poll. So can everyone see the results? Yeah? Okay, so yeah, so the highest vote for vitamin C content was medium orange, and the correct answer was cloudberries. And just to give you an idea of what the amount of vitamin C was for each of those things. So cloudberries had 95, oh, hold on, I have a slide that shows it. Might as well show that. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So cloudberries have 95 milligrams of vitamin C per cup versus a medium orange, which only has 68 milligrams And the third highest is actually fish eggs with 50 milligrams, and the least is vegetable juice with 35 milligrams. So just an interesting thing to just to reflect a little bit more about how context is important. You know, we also learn a lot in textbooks that are very Western oriented most of the time about the certain things that have high nutritional value, but certain things don't usually show up in there. So the same thing here is with vitamin A content. So actually caribou liver has the highest vitamin A content with 3010 RAE. And RAE just means retinol activity equivalent. So it's just the amount of vitamin A that they use. Narwhal blubber is the second highest with 1450 RAE. A sweet potato has just under 1,000, and cooked carrots have half of that only. So cooked carrots have 6 times less vitamin A than the same amount of caribou liver. So again, just to give you an idea about how context is important, and there is a bioregional appropriateness for each food, and it's important. It's so important to celebrate the foods in one's local environment. And when there are certain food security projects, and we'll go into the funding a bit later, but a lot of them look a lot at less of that contextual component, and it's up to communities to inform the context of where they're coming from. And it might mean that not every project is going to be growing lettuce, but maybe lettuce is important in that community. So it really just depends. But nutrition comes from many different places. So that's what I wanted to kind of show in this activity. Again, very quick, just fun fact about the different types of nutrition coming from different parts of caribou. So there's vitamin C in caribou heart. There's folate in caribou liver, which we also often associate with oranges. So yeah. And this was coming from the Nunavut Department of Health, by the way, in case you're interested. All right, so that's it on my end. So we're gonna now go to Tina's presentation.
It's already 3.
It's already 3. We're very late. Yeah, very sorry about that. I think what we'll do is, so hopefully, so this next part of the presentation will be around 15 minutes, hopefully, and then we'll still have 15 minutes for questions, but we'll allow everyone to stay longer if you feel like it. So we'll be around until 4. So yeah, sorry about that. And yes, I will now quickly introduce Tina. So Tina is a Métis woman from who works at the Keepers of the Circle, and she holds a degree in journalism. She has a diploma in environmental science and conservation, and she has 2 certificates in permaculture design. So she has a lot of different varying experience. She's been contributing to multiple food forest projects in Northern Ontario, and she has been empowering communities to become leaders in their own local food systems. So take it away, Tina.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It sounds so much better when you say it. But here I'll end up sharing my screen. I'm going to jump right in and do the same as my co-panelist there. And it was great, Laura. A fantastic presentation, by the way. All right. I think I can start like this. Everybody can see that? Is there anything in the way? That's okay? And everybody can hear me clearly since I have my headphones on?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to minimize here. Well, all right. Hello, everybody. We're going to be talking to you about Keepers of the Circle, our Indigenous organization, and some of the wonderful projects involving food sovereignty and food production practices with Indigenous community. I'm going to give you a little bit of the rundown of what they've been up to, and it is becoming fantastic, and it's expanding every year. And I think it just shows how much our Indigenous people really want to learn about food sovereignty and really want to bring this to their communities and to the forefront for security and sovereignty, safety, sustainability. So the two projects that I'm going to talk to you about are the Anishinaabeg, which is the People's Garden initiatives, which is the food forests for a site in New Liskeard and the site in Kirkland Lake. So I will get into a little bit more detail about that and how wonderful that was to create. And then I am currently now leading the Kino Megagagamic site, which is our place of learning site. And it is an initiative to create green spaces around a former youth detention center. So it's actually a very intense, wonderful project that we're working on that I'd love to share with you today. So Keepers of the Circle is an urban Indigenous hub operated by the Témiscamingue Native Women's Support Group. It's a non-for-profit organization established in '97 to support the political, social, and economic equality of Indigenous women and the wellness of their families and communities. Keepers of the Circle is the Ontario representative also of the Native Women's Association of Canada, with two sites, one in Témiscamingue Shores and the other in Kirkland Lake. We also host Minnow-Mishkiki Health Centers, which we do have both in New Liskeard and Kirkland Lake in both of our sites, which is the overall health center for our local Indigenous communities. And they receive everything and anything that has to do with healing and wellness. And it is very culturally based as well, and geared to the Indigenous culture here. So it's quite a large organization with a lot of a lot of incredible successes. So the People's Garden, Anishinaabeg, this is just a visual of the first model that we, Jennifer Noble, who was the designer at the time, took all of our ideas and our thoughts. And this is sort of the visual for the New Liskeard site at Scotch Street, which was, it almost looks just so identical. It's crazy. But anyways, this is basically what it looks like. It's a very beautiful space. And we only had a space of about, I want to say 100 feet by like maybe 150 feet to create around the New Liskeard site. So that was quite a challenge, right? Working in a smaller space in opposed to working in the Kirkland Lake site, which is almost an acre, which is fascinating. So I have to talk about the elders in this because they are at the forefront of everything we do at Keepers of the Circle. We do receive our guidance from the Wisdom Keepers Council, which is made up of elders from our various First Nations communities. So we have some represented elders from Matachewan First Nation, Beaver House First Nation, Témiscamingue First Nation on the Quebec side, and the Métis communities. And I think we don't have anybody from Temagami yet, but I think we're working towards that. So you do have quite a few representations on there on that council. And so they oversee and help guide us when we're doing these kinds of projects and things like that. They're right there with us every step of the way. And so one that sticks out is Elder Marie Boucher from Matachewan First Nation. She was an incredible elder. She really led the led these projects to happen. So she said, quote, "Land-based learning is a way of life for Indigenous people. Many teachings are about the land and our way of life on it. So children need to be on the land to learn about the old ways. We have to take our children out to the land to be able to pick up our way of life." So that was a really key statement that she made in a consultation with us, and really just stuck to us, and really was the base of why we were creating what we were creating. And then we had Elder Sally Matthias from Beaver House First Nation. She said, "Indigenous people need to be with their peers who have similar lived experience, same or similar stories, to heal and thrive. Indigenous people understand each other and find comfort in sharing our stories with each other, and especially our elders and spiritual leaders. There needs to be groups where Indigenous people gather and learn culture and language in an atmosphere of understanding, safety, and acceptance." So that was taken from the Indigenous Service District of Témiscamingue, Our Journey Together, which is another report that we have put out in 2017. They were a part of all of those consultations. So we brought in, not only did we bring in the elders during the beginning stages of these projects, but we brought in all the families as well, and the children from the daycares, the staff were also incorporated into that discussion so that everybody had a voice in there, especially our elders. So the key vision for the Anishinaabe was the creation of an inspiring outdoor space, which not only supports Indigenous cultural values and teachings, but promotes food sovereignty and intergenerational knowledge sharing. And just make a note, the beautiful photograph there is a teepee style, teepee formed insect hotel that was created by our Indigenous summer students as a sort of a component added to the food forest space in Kirkland Lake. And it was a huge hit. Not only do the kids love to go in there and play with that, but they also gain a lot of great education from it once you're able to go through it with them, and they get to see all the little things inside. So stepping forward to how we came about this, our funders, which is the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative funding for the new Lisgard site. So we had two separate funds. So you might run into this problem as a community as well, where, you know, our projects become bigger than we initiated. So we ended up tapping into two separate funds. So I wanted to share that dynamic with you. So the Food Sovereignty Initiatives Program, which is CFC project through Keepers of the Circle, is focused on developing a food forest at our training centers located in KL and New Lisgard. Both locations are home to Keepers of the Circle learning centers, the daycares, the Minumishkiki Health Center, and the Keepers of the Circle employee facilities for our pre-employment training program, Culture, Confidence, and Competence. By building a community food forest at these locations, we can utilize the existing traffic in this public space and create a communal and convenient area for Indigenous families that use our existing daycare facilities to access and grow food. Community members will also have the opportunity to learn and practice the skills of gardening and growing. And as the food forest continues to flourish and thrive over the long term, it will also create a direct channel for Indigenous families who are experiencing food insecurity to access clean and healthy food. Sorry, I gotta hide my panel here. Whoops, that's not the one. There we go. There are two outcomes of this project. One was the low-income Indigenous families experiencing food insecurity will be provided with healthier food options. And then the other is the greater community engagement from Indigenous people as they become motivated to develop growing skills. So those were the two big goals. So the other one, the other funder we dealt with is the Canada Community Revitalization Fund. And that was for our Kirkland Lake site. You can see there's a beautiful photo of sort of the walkway going in. And some of these are earlier photos. I do apologize for not having a more recent one. She looks beautiful right now. It's all blooming. But anyways, this is sort of the walkway through, and it's a very long piece of land to work with. So it's about an acre of garden, which is wonderful. This project is the development of an Indigenous-led interactive food forest system. So there's a little bit of a twist in both states. A demonstration site that models sustainable land use and renewable energy systems. So we will actually have installments and water collection systems, as well as solar installation systems, and a few other renewable energies that will be powering whatever needs to be powered within the food forest. Excuse me one second. Okay, building a food forest will transform the existing public grounds at the KOC Center, excuse me, into an outdoor space where Indigenous peoples would gather for seasonal ceremonies and community-wide celebrations. This outdoor space would also function as a venue where land-based learning can take place for people of all ages and cultures to learn about Indigenous land use and agricultural practices. The KOC Hub is already a place connected to over 35 Indigenous communities. We reach over 300 Indigenous women through training, 763 community members through our health services at the Mino-Mishkiki Indigenous Health Team, and 68 children of all ages along with their families with our in-house Indigenous daycare. The goal of this project is to build the infrastructure to support the development of an interactive food forest that can be actively used by Indigenous community members for a variety of purposes. Once in production, our food forest will be a place of learning for land-based learning and can provide over 50 local families experiencing food insecurity direct access to nutrient-dense, safe, and healthy foods. We will also integrate key green technologies, as I was saying, to showcase energy production opportunities and demonstrate how to build self-sustaining systems. The food forest system will be an interactive space to learn about food security, nutrition, regenerative agriculture practices, traditional medicines, and renewable energies. At Current, we have purchased freeze dryer. We've purchased a lot of components that will allow us to be able to serve the community and educate the community on the various types of preservation efforts of food, et cetera, et cetera. So designing a food forest for Northern Ontario, one of our colleagues says, the garden really needs to take care of itself. Isn't that so true? Excuse me one sec. Like a plant, I need water. I really do. Yeah, so that's what one of our colleagues said. The garden really needs to take care of itself, and I'm glad they captured that, because aren't we sort of all like that in a sense? We would love to see our nature take back and create what it's used to creating, instead of having to face barriers all the time. So our replicable model is throughout the project timeline, Keepers of the Circle's Food Sovereignty Initiative. Program staff have been creating a replicable food forest and Indigenous food sovereignty curriculum, which we have designed, informed by the development of food forests at Keepers of the Circle locations in the Témiscamingue district. So the design process was drones were used to create landscape maps of both locations. Very, very highly recommend, if you are working in your communities, drone technology is extremely important, and it really gives us a better eye of things. Anyway, it was the most exciting part of this whole. So we were, drones were used to create landscape maps of both locations, which became the base of the cartographic models and site designs for both locations. Through use of these maps, the site designers were not only able to capitalize on knowing site features like the current slope, microclimates, water catchment, and zone features, but were also able to use these maps as visual aids during consultations with elders, wisdom keepers, and the keepers of the circle staff to co-design the sites. The maps were then used as the base for professional 2 and 3D renderings, which is the one we showed you when we first started the presentation. The multiple versions of the maps, including dimensional maps, were produced and provided for contractors and project staff. So these are like a little bit of the ins and outs, and I'm only sharing this because I think they're important tips and facts about the real how this is created. A surveying company was hired to perform a site survey at the KL site, at the KL location, to confirm and define property lines to ensure mapping and project installation was accurate and legal. The final survey concluded that our Kirkland Lake property is much larger than previously thought. So there's another reason why you would want to get into this kind of design process. We did soil samples and data collection in a larger area parallel to the KL Food Forest site, which we now know belongs to KOTC, is slated for a remediation project focused on risk mitigation and reduction through regular monitoring of the entire site. So the soil samples were taken from both sites, and Kirkland Lake samples showed higher than normal heavy metal contamination in some areas adjacent to the hydro lines and the train track. We are also in former mining territory. If you're not familiar with the history of Kirkland Lake, that is where the Mile of Gold runs, basically creating the floodgates, basically creating Toronto, as we're told. So there was a lot of mining activity previously, so that will affect that. So further testing was undertaken to assess the safety of the site, and recommendations were made by environmental scientists. And so we which included regular plant analysis and monitoring. And we're just about to do another soil analysis just now to see if any of the remediation work that we did has paid off. So it does pay, it does also pay to make sure those soil samples are done, and just making sure you know what's in the ground prior to starting any kind of growing space. Community consultations are key to everything that you do. So between February and May, multiple consultations were held with the Elders Council, as I mentioned before, Keepers of the Circle staff and daycare, as well as Minnomishkiki Indigenous Health Team staff. The consultations were held via Zoom conference and were supplemented by a visual presentation which displayed the current design maps and everything. So this is exactly what we're sort of doing here, but in a more grand scale and more in-depth presentation for the consultation. So here are some of the educational initiatives that have come out of some of this. So we did establish the, I apologize for that, the Témiscamingue Seed Keepers, which is our youth group. It's developed by our youth, and it's run by our youth and maintained by our youth. And then we also have volunteers in this group as well. So the Témiscamingue Seed Keepers aims to create access to local regionally adapted seeds and knowledge sharing. So we do have that, our seed pantry. The TSK Seed Bank initiative was developed in parallel with the Food Forest project to support the long-term needs of the space by providing seeds and an annual calendar of educational workshops in order to build capacity within our organization and community to ensure long-term success of the food forests. And then in spring of 2022, we did the first initiative was launched, our seed starter kits. And so they were promoted and 29 kits were distributed to our KOTC memberships. That's probably higher than that because I know we had over 100 printed, and they were left pretty fast. The kits were made of direct sow vegetable seeds for a cold hardy staple garden. and they included garlic, onions, potatoes, beets, carrots, sugar snap peas, green beans, and perennial green onions. So yeah, so lots of spin-off from these things. Food security training as well, land-based food security training, growing resilience. We had all kinds of training. As I said, we even had drone training. We had language camps, hunt camps. We had the cultural ground and activities down there with youth, and doing berry harvesting and all kinds of things. So this is just kind of like a model of like the continuance of how we would like this to go, and which is kind of going that way, which is wonderful. So yeah, so there is food security training, and lots of opportunities for Indigenous women to access training, education and training in permaculture design. I'm one of them. I've received training through Keepers of the Circle as I was doing my own professional development. And so I wanted to gain more knowledge about land management training and stuff like that. And so when the drone training was brought forward, we were all given the opportunity to do that training. So it's such a great project and such a great initiative for everyone involved. So here's the 3 years and beyond. Okay, so it's one thing to put it together. It's another thing to maintain the food forest for the next couple of years, right? While things are establishing themselves and plants are trying to make connection to the ground. So this care plan, it was developed to support the care and maintenance and the long-term capacity building for both the Kirkland Lake and Elisgard food forest sites. So we built a maintenance dock, and it's basically over 300 pages of serious maintenance, but it's all on how to take care of the food forest and all the plants that are in there, all of their plant monographs, all of that information, all in one spot. As well too, in the care maintenance package, they can actually, staff can actually go in there and go to any given activity, and it'll be all broken down for them, the education about it. Like say if it was a solar install, then they would even have a whole page devoted just to solar installation and what they could share with the people if they're having a workshop on that or on green building. So there's a lot in that document. So this is what this care plan is. So this database of it was created to address the safety and efforts of the food forest systems and the interactions between it, its members, etc. So we do have like certain documents for elders versus, you know, because they have like maybe they want like a prayer that has to do with like with the forest, or with food. So we try to help them in that respect, and provide those in the document. Ensuring this document also is ensuring the food forest runs smoothly, maintenance is kept up, and the educational opportunities continue to be available. It's of utmost importance to the project. The maintenance schedules, checklists, and organizational responsibility charts have been created and included. Edible and medicinal plant databases, like I was saying, have been made available, and safety training for bear encounters has already taken place at both sites. So there's lots of things you can do. The care plan contains equipment maintenance and usage instructions as well. So we also have a page devoted to each piece of equipment in the food forest and what it's made for and how to use it. Information from our seed sources and tree nurseries, so local people as well, local suppliers. We also try to connect and make connection with them to bring them into these community projects. Now we're going to fast track, and I'm going to try and do this quick, Fiona. I'm fast tracking to 2024. Yay! This is our new site. This is the old Panagar site. It used to be the old youth detention center in Kirkland Lake. So it was like a jail. So it's got that really cool vibe to it. And it then became a children's aid office, which was crazy, CAS. So so now we're taking this over to put our training facility in there because we're getting so big. that we have to find a new space. So this space was brought forward with the city of Kirkland Lake, and there's a definitely an agreement in place for use of the land with Keepers of the Circle. So we applied for a funding for the Natural Infrastructures Fund in order to put some green spaces there as well. So all of the, like, if you see all of the, I don't know if you can see my arrow, I hope so. But all of this space here is all a pollinator garden now. It doesn't even look the same. There's like walkways and all kinds of things happening, but it's just not completed yet. So I didn't really have permission to show you a nice picture. And then in the back here, you'll see it's all fenced in, right? Like it's got the jail. So this big fenced in area actually is going to be the site of the actual community garden. So we're pretty excited about that. And then in the behind of the building, you can see the water, which is Gull Lake. It's the source drinking water for the city of Kirkland Lake. So we also have access to that. And then on the side here in the back and behind these buildings here, all in the forest, here's our food forest. And it is also the grounds for the Minnomishkiki longhouse that they're going to build, and a 50-foot teepee apparently is going in there. So there is quite a bit happening. So I'm going to fast track. Both food forests are self-sustaining, and they are starting to be regularly used by Indigenous families. The daycare is on site, and KOTC staff for the programs they offer. Moreover, KOTC received funds from the Natural Infrastructure Fund to develop a green spaces initiative for their newly acquired Kino Megagamic site, which means place of learning in Ojibwe. This site will act as KOTC's training center, which will offer pre-employment training through our culture competence confidence program, our skills trades training for apprenticeships in the trades, green energy and technology training, entrepreneurship training. The green spaces surrounding the building will support cultural activity around Indigenous medicine and health through our Minnomishkiki health centers, provide food sovereignty for the community, support activities dedicated to land management and monitoring through KOTC's impact assessment work. And then the land and building are part of a land use lease agreement with the city. And the land is approximately 18 acres on beautiful Gull Lake, which is the source drinking water for the community of Kel, as mentioned before. And that kind of wraps up sort of a little bit of what we've been working on. I don't know if I gave it any justice, but I hope it did.
Thank you so much, Tina. That was wonderful. I found it was so great to kind of see the variety that both you, Laura, and Tina, that you both brought to the presentations, kind of looking a bit at the theory and then also the Quebec and the Arctic context, and then bringing it to Ontario as well and looking at some of the practical examples and specifically the processes and what it took to get there. So that was really, really wonderful. And thank you so much to both of you. And I know that we are over time. So we have one more section we wanted to go through, which is mainly funding related. And I think what we will do is cut that part short and send everyone the funding opportunities if that works for everyone. There are a couple things that maybe we can speak on quickly, and then I would ask that anybody that needs to leave soon or as soon as possible, if you have questions, to bring them up first. And then once we're able to address those questions, then maybe those who can stay longer can ask their questions. Yeah, so I hope that works for everybody. We'll just fly through some of the last slides, so about what's next. And we do want to talk about if those of you who are on the call want to talk more about how to start your own project, we're happy to talk about that more in the comments. But essentially, I think what's been made clear through these conversations and presentations is that it's very important first to do some planning and to have that done in advance in order to be able to properly conduct the project later. And the first step would be to identify the community's unique needs, as has also been mentioned, and each project is different. So, and each context is different. So identifying that with all demographics from the community involved is the first step. Similarly to the land, what the land needs, what the land can hold, the foods that are able to grow on the land or harvested on the land. So identifying all those things in advance, and then of course, looking at funding. And so I know I mentioned before, but just again, we have quite a large funding list that can support you if you're looking into more projects. And I know Tina has shared or has agreed to share a lot of opportunities as well. So thank you again so much for that, Tina. And anyway, so we'll talk about that a bit more. But then anyway, so the next step would be creating an action plan once you have the funding or know what funding is available, and kind of navigating that funding depending on how it's worded or what they're looking for, and then create a plan for the community. And really having a plan for the next 5 years or however long it is really also helps for the funders to see that you have these concrete steps that you've thought about, and really helps to secure funding as well. And it also just really helps to, for things not to slip away. Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but it's very easy to grow a project to a point where you think that at first this certain amount of funding is enough, and then all of a sudden there are all these different additions that you start realizing you need or want. And so yeah, it's important to have a plan. So and then after that you start your project. So just a little bit of a, again, just high level guide of, it's very difficult to just start with number 5. There's a lot of context that needs to be created first. Yeah, and planning. So anyway, next we go to the funding opportunities, which, yeah, we will talk about in the chat and send out. But just here at the top, you see that a lot of the funding doesn't necessarily have the name of food security. You can see health, infrastructure, business, arts, culture, agriculture, all those might be keywords that end up being funding opportunities that you can use for food security. So don't shy away from these kinds of different names. They can often very much be applied to food security. And there are a lot of people on this call that can support with that too. The keepers of the circle have a lot of knowledge on this funding, the way to strategize funding. I don't want to promise that Tina has all the time in the world, but just to say, like, especially today in the conversation, these are things we can speak about. Adonai Terra provides, support in planning. I know Laura has a lot of also knowledge about what's possible and what's not, and has been included in initiatives. So anyway, next part is really to ask those questions, and we're very happy to answer anything you would like to ask us, and also share your experience.